You've heard of buyer's remorse, right? But what about seller's remorse? Yes, there is such a thing. Just as buyers can experience regret after making a purchase, sellers can also feel remorseful after selling something. Hello, 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 and welcome to More Than Money, a podcast where we have nuanced conversations about money, business, and life, where we take the time to explore the human side of money. Because success with money is never just about the numbers. I'm your host, Jacquette Timmons, and I am really glad that you are here with me today. So, whether this is your very first episode or one of many, welcome. And hey, before we get into today's episode, I know you have heard me say this recently, but we are getting closer and closer to when I am hosting the next Pricing Made Human masterclass. And let's face it, money is very personal, business is very personal, and that is one of the many reasons why pricing is very personal. And it is also why getting your pricing correct is A, never a one size fits all exercise, and B, it's never a one and done exercise. We are constantly revisiting it and getting even better at it. And while there isn't a general rule of thumb regarding when you should review your pricing, because it depends on your market, what it is that you offer, your clients, your competition, and economic factors, etc., I am of the mindset that it should be done regularly. And if you're unable to do it quarterly, well, then the next best thing is twice a year. So, our biannual pricing masterclass is coming up soon. And that is where we take the time to pause and take a holistic look and approach to your pricing, looking at your relationship with money, your relationship with yourself, with your business, and with the folks that you work with and want to serve, your clients, your prospects, and your customers, all of which play obvious and not so obvious roles in your pricing. So to learn more and to RSVP, go to jacquettetimmons.com/pricing dash masterclass. Again, jacquettetimmons.com/pricing dash masterclass. I hope to see you there. But in the meantime, let's get into today's show, is what I'm trying to say. I bet you are familiar with buyer's remorse. Heck, I actually can't even imagine that you've never experienced it, especially since it is a common psychological phenomenon characterized by feelings of regret or unease following a purchase. And it typically occurs when a buyer experiences doubt or second guessing about their decision to buy a particular item or service. I am grateful that it hasn't happened to me too often, but when I have had buyer's remorse, oof, it has not been fun. You really just kind of beat up on yourself, like, why did I do that? But you know what I dislike even more? When I have had seller's remorse. Yes, there is such a thing. Just as buyers can experience regret after making a purchase, sellers can also feel remorse after selling something. Thankfully, I haven't had experience with this too often either. But when I have, it has often been because I either sold something for too low of a price, or I allowed myself to negotiate against my business's best interest in the long run, or I realized after the fact that I chose to work with a client who ultimately proved to be the wrong fit, or maybe they were actually the right fit, but it was just simply the wrong time for them. Seller's remorse is a phenomenon that mirrors buyer's remorse in terms of regret and dissatisfaction, both of which really suck. But I don't believe that seller's remorse is something we talk about enough. So today, I want to explore with you three aspects of seller's remorse and hopefully heighten your awareness about it so that you can reduce the frequency with which you might experience it, or be on the lookout for ways to prevent it from happening in the first place. And the thing that I want to start with is negotiation. So the idea of seller's remorse really popped to mind as I was reflecting back on a conversation with a client. We were T accounting the pros and the cons of whether she should negotiate her quoted fee. Of course, there's a financial ramification for doing so. But what I mostly heard during our conversation was that she felt like agreeing to negotiate was somehow diminishing the value of her work, of her expertise, and of her experience. On one hand, she wanted to be flexible, especially if it meant getting the client and getting the work. On the other hand, she didn't want to get the short end of the stick, financially or reputationally. And I get it. Choosing to negotiate is complex with both emotional as well as financial ramifications. It involves an interplay of communication, strategy, and compromise with both players that are in the room, as well as those who aren't, that you may not have even had a chance to talk to or even exchange emails with. And everybody is influencing how everything is playing out. Plus, what's being negotiated holds a different meaning for everyone that is involved. Now, when or when not to negotiate is both highly personal and dependent upon the opportunity and what's at stake. So, when negotiating, here are a few things to be mindful of in order to avoid regret or dissatisfaction with choosing to do so. And the first thing is to know, why are you willing to negotiate? Do you need the cash? Do you need this client to help you get the next one? Do you need this client and the work that you're going to do with them or for them to be the validation or the proof of concept so that you can get new additional clients, right? So what is this opportunity going to bring about on the other side? The second is know your walkaway number or terms. Are you willing to lose the sale or the deal altogether if the counter to your initial quote is too low? Do you know the concessions or the compromises that are just a bridge too far for you? And also, do you know how to recognize when you are being bullied? Because that can sometimes happen as well. And then the third piece when it comes to negotiation is know what you want in return. You are already leaving some money on the table. So make sure that you are not leaving anything else of value on the table too. So what are some tangible and intangible things that you can request so that you don't just feel like you are the only one giving up something, but that you are also getting something that you value in return? My whole thing is it's not so much to or not to negotiate. It's more about, do you have a process for how you negotiate and know in advance the items that I've just ticked off here? Because doing so will greatly minimize the likelihood that you will feel dissatisfied with the outcome or regret the decisions that you made during the negotiation process. Next up is pricing. Just like I am familiar with the feeling of remorse when you realize you negotiated against your business's best interests, I also know what it feels like to confront the fact that you are undercharging. Friends, mentors, and coaches used to tell me all the time that I wasn't charging enough. And this is less true today, thankfully. But what you charge is another factor to consider when it comes to what triggers seller's remorse. And I actually think that this is more subtle than the process of negotiating. We know that getting your pricing right, quote unquote, right, is really a multi-layered mystery that needs to be unlocked. A mystery because right is not some simple one-size-fits-all universal number. It's unique. It's unique to you. It's unique to your business and what you need your business to do for you. And when I work with clients on helping them to get their pricing right, we dive into 4 key relationships: your relationship with money, with yourself, with your business, and with the folks that you serve, your prospects, your clients, and your customers. And in the process, we invariably uncover an offer or perhaps an entire portfolio of offers that are underpriced. And though pricing wasn't my client's challenge in this particular instance, I know I'm not the only one to have wrestled with the tendency to undercharge. And it usually comes about for one of any of the following reasons. You're underestimating. So the question is, what are you underestimating? Many of my clients, and maybe this pertains to you as well, didn't receive formal training in how to price what they do. Heck, I have an MBA in finance, and this wasn't part of my curriculum in business school. So when people set their prices, they have a tendency to rely on how this was handled, where they worked prior to striking out on their own, or they follow common industry practices without second guessing whether or not that should work for them in their own business, or they rely on what their colleagues and their peers are currently doing and charging. And so, in addition to one of these, or a combination, or all of what I've just described, they also, and I would add wrongly, approach pricing with only a calculator. And they typically underestimate the time, the effort, and the resources required of them to create, to deliver, and to maintain their offers. And they also don't factor in both the soft and the hard costs of doing and running a business, or the real cost of ensuring that their business is taking care of the health of their personal finances too. So once they see the net number after all of the deductions and what they are able to do with what's left over, they begin to resent the price that they sold it at, because the compensation just simply doesn't feel fair. And this is one of the ways that triggers sellers' remorse. But it also shows up in, who are you afraid of losing or alienating? And here's what I mean by that. The price of your offers has several jobs. One of them is to attract and repel prospects, clients, and customers. Ironically, what I notice is that a lot of entrepreneurs and small business owners, and I've been guilty of this as well, pay more attention to the folks their price is designed to repel. And repel gets a really bad rap. You're not repelling the dignity of the person, but you are saying, this is my price point, and either you can afford it or you cannot afford it. And the reason why people have a hard time with this is because they don't want to offend, and or they want to be perceived as being accessible. Therefore, the fear of losing or alienating clients, customers, or prospects plays a larger sized role in their approach to pricing than is actually beneficial, even though this usually means sacrificing their own financial well-being in the process. So pricing for everyone is another way pricing triggers sellers' remorse. Also connected to pricing is this: how well do you articulate the value of what it is that you offer? And notice I didn't say your value or your worth. If you know me and are familiar with my body of work, you know I despise the phrase, oh, so much, charge what you're worth. I despise that with a passion. And just like pricing has several jobs, the same is true for your offers. And so the questions here are you clear about those jobs in terms of what value it is, what value your offer is bringing to the folks that it is intended to serve? How effective are you at communicating that value? If you lack clarity or you are unskillful at communicating why someone should buy from you, this too can cause you to price what you offer too low. So we talked about negotiating and pricing, but here's another aspect of sellers' remorse. And I call this the wrong client, or perhaps the wrong time. In almost 30 years of business, I am grateful and quite frankly lucky to have had only 4 instances where I realized after the fact that the client was a wrong fit, or that while the client was a right fit, it really wasn't the right time for them. So, right fit, but wrong time. Either way, experiencing seller's remorse because it's the wrong client or the wrong time, it is just plain awful and unfulfilling emotionally. And in my instance, it was also detrimental to my bottom line and my cash flow because in each scenarios, I refunded the money, even though I was under no legal obligation to do so according to my agreement. But I didn't want the negative energy. If you've been there, you know what I mean. The regret and the dissatisfaction that stems from entering into a professional relationship that ends up not working out is the absolute worst feeling. And this type of remorse can manifest for various reasons. For example, mismatched expectations, unreasonable demands, or boundaries not being respected and honored. In my case, all of these were present. And it boiled down to this. And this is what I have to take responsibility for. I didn't follow my discovery and vetting process at all times. I would skip a step or two, and I would skip a step or two because of how that person came into my world. Well, let's just say I no longer make that mistake. So, can we ever prevent seller's remorse? Look, seller's remorse can be just as distressing as buyer's remorse. And while I suspect it is not possible to avoid ever experiencing it, I do believe that you can minimize its frequency. And you can minimize its frequency if you are proactive about why and when it might happen in the first place. And based on that, or based on this, create a prevention and a response plan. And of course, we can all start by talking about the phenomenon of seller's remorse more in the first place. This is my contribution. This episode is my contribution to that effort. And I hope that you will join me in that. Well, folks, that is it for today. I am off to the Metropolitan Black Bar Association's annual gala, so I need to hop, but I wanted to get this recording in the can before I did so. As always, thank you for listening. If you'd like to show appreciation for this podcast or perhaps this particular episode, please do me a favor and share it with your folks so that we can reach more people. If you happen to be listening on Apple Podcasts, please take a moment to leave a rating and a review. A, we do read them. B, it does help us with the algorithm. And if you happen to be watching on YouTube, thank you so much for doing that. We love knowing that we are getting more subscribers over there. And of course, if you'd like to buy me a coffee, here's how you can do that. buymeacoffee.com/Jaquette. Again, buymeacoffee.com/Jaquette. I will be back with another episode, and I hope that you will too. Until then, remember, it's about more than money.